For someone so deeply connected to horror and the spooky season, I'm also an avid lover of the Christmas spirit. For many years, good old Santa delivered the coolest of gifts, and really, my whole family went above and beyond to give me the best of the best with the limited money they had. As time has gone on, it's become my mission to give gifts with just as much thought and love behind them. And typically, it's video game gifts that hit the hardest. This is likely due to the emotional connection between the sights, sounds, physical action, and the nostalgic reflection that comes afterwards. Now, don't worry, this is still going to be a video about Christmas games that are sort of silly, but I also think it'll be fun to have some friends chime in between chapters with their favorite Christmas gaming memories.
One of my favorite Christmas memories is something that was started more recently, probably about 7 years ago, where my stepmom wanted to do an ornament exchange every year. That way we could get ornaments to set our own tree when we move out. And when I met Sleepless Sheep, we ended up doing that tradition between the two of us as well, and that quickly became game related. Last year, I made her a custom DS ornament, and I printed and laminated screenshots of the Pokemon game that we were playing. I think it was Soul Silver and Heart Gold. And then this year's were Bahama Bucks Sonic ornaments. So Bahama Bucks actually made their own ornaments, and then I just painted them and laminated mini stick thingies to put in them. Anyways, it'll make more sense when the picture's up.
While there aren't a ton of purely Christmas-focused games, I feel as though it's my duty this year to spread the video game cheer. And who better to help us do that than the Grinch? Oh, well, I suppose that's a bit of an oxymoron, isn't it? There have been 4 How the Grinch Stole Christmas video games, all on various consoles from different years. The first game released in October of 2000, published by Konami and developed by Behavior Interactive. Behavior is a company I talked about recently, and I can't remember for the life of me why, but they're most famous for creating Dead by Daylight. And as for Konami in the year 2K, they were pumping out a ton of DDR and rhythm games, but also a good group of licensed stuff, like Hunter x Hunter, Wacky Races, and some Yu-Gi-Oh! Oh, I'm super hyped for the early days collection, by the way. I'm big on my boy Joey. The game we're talking about is simply titled The Grinch, and it's on PS1, Dreamcast, and PC CD-ROM. It also released on Game Boy Color just a few weeks after the console port. We'll talk about that one in a few. My personal Grinch copy is a PAL Region Dreamcast release, and I'm obsessed with the cover art. He doesn't quite look like the classic Seuss design, but he's also not straight up Jim Carrey. As for the actual 3D models, he looks like that amphibian sea creep from The Shape of Water, except he's getting no booty today. The opening cutscene has a grumpy Grinch plotting with Max in order to create the machines he'll need to break Whoville's Christmas stuffs. This doesn't go as planned, and he loses all his blueprints, so this is what gets us down into the town while destroying Christmas presents, playing pranks on the Whos, and finding pieces of his blueprints in the process, so he can screw up Christmas. Of course, by the end of the game, he realizes the wrong of his ways and delivers the gifts back to the Whos in a cutscene. In this game, you'll actually see a decent amount of different-looking 3D levels. You'll go through Whoville, the Who Forest, Whoville Municipal Dump, and Who Lake. A standout level is actually the final one, where you use his sleigh collecting presents Santa drops before shooting that fatty out of the sky. It's a timed little race to shoot Santa down, and it can actually be down to the wire on whether you'll make it or not. This specific section actually looks really good, seeing as the frame rate is consistent and the dark Christmas sky hides the JPEG stuff we saw in other parts of the game. There's much sharper edges on objects, as well as the usual PlayStation dithering and pop-in if you're not playing my version. So visually, I prefer the Dreamcast copy, though I think any version is developed weakly and with a rather uninspired design. The actual 2000 live-action movie is sort of awing in how beautiful the sets are, so why am I looking at a ratchet little tan brick building with no doors? But I do have to give shoutouts to the snow, because the little glistening specks are kinda cute and a thoughtful addition. I think if anything, it just really needed to push color to get that fun Seuss look. There's some voice acting here, with a cameo by George Lowe as narrator, who does a great job rhyming how you'd expect a Seuss cadence to be. The actual Grinch voice is alright. Luckily, he doesn't try to mimic Jim Carrey or the original Grinch voice actor, Boris Karloff.
Love you and everybody. Yes, even the Who's. Let's go. We must bring them back their gifts.
The actor's name is Josh Gerhardt, and he's done a lot of classic anime additional voice dubbing, like in Akira, Bebop, and a few other things. He rhymes well, so I can't knock him too much. Max doesn't speak in this one, so luckily we don't have furries playing a dog or a stock sound effect we've heard for 50 years. As for the Who's, they sing at the very end and it's absolutely tone deaf, but in a way I can get behind. The Grinch should be campy. Who's with me? Before we wrap up, I have to highlight how good the OST is. Every single area has a genuinely great little track that complements the sneaky missions versus the shooting missions versus the home base, etc. Sometimes they're jazzy, sometimes they're poppy, sometimes they're mysterious and spooky. Plus, the sound effects in the game are really high quality and add a cartoonish splash in a way the graphics can't quite do. As for the Game Boy Color alternative, without having voice acting, narration, it does a better job delivering the charm of a Grinch story with its pixel art. The opening words to introduce you to the game and your mission are accompanied by really lovely images that are so vibrant and true to the core movie and book. The Grinch has his classic long fuzzy fingers and chest. Max looks like a dog and not a scary tan lump. Each setting, although limited in how it can be displayed in 2D, is fun to look at and scroll through. The goal of the game, collecting gifts and gadgets while messing with the Who's, is the same, but the levels are obviously less open world and look a bit more like a classic Game Boy Mario joint. It's more of a puzzle, figuring out where to lead the Who's so you can get what they're blocking without being caught. Sometimes the amount of enemy Who's you have to evade is intense and quickly turns the Grinch into Metal Grinch Solid. The final confrontation is definitely not a shooter segment, instead just having you travel through a much longer side-scrolling map to collect the final few Who's gifts, before showing you a very well-made cutscene with the same moral of the story you've come to expect from Mr. Scrunch. The one thing I have to complain about slightly is the music. I tend to feel this way when it comes to 4-channel sound systems, but the amount of squeaky, high-pitched noises really gets under my skin after 25 minutes. I credit them for having so many different tracks. They're all pretty good, but again, it really grates on me over time. I quite like this version of the Grinch, and it's fairly long for a game of its type, giving you about 2.5 hours of gameplay. If you are interested in this experience, it's less than $12 cart only, but 40 complete. If you'd like to play the console version, it's cheaper in the US at $25 on both systems. Likely due to some licensing stuff or a lower print run, the PAL versions are both more around $45 and up.
I think my favorite Christmas memory would have to be getting Combat Evolved and playing it for hours on the Xbox. Or anytime I got the new Call of Duty, it always felt like there was something to do with a snow mission, so I always felt that was so well timed. I remember being at my grandparents' first house before they moved, and my grandmother passed, and my parents brought down the system with us, and I got Batman Arkham Asylum, and I rented that game prior, and I loved it, and it was so cool playing it all Christmas Day.
The Grinch Christmas Adventures came out in 2023, but this year they released an extra spicy version that came with postcards, and yeah, that's it. Hey, at least it's $40 and not $60. It's actually kind of funny that I've bought copies of this game twice. I don't know, the Grinchy Grunch has a way with girls, because they're all over him and his bad breath. Anyhow, this was published by Outright Games, a company synonymous with budget license games that people often shrug off or trash talk. They're always getting pretty sick licenses to send out to smaller developers to make, and at the very least, I'd say they seem to be a company with more integrity than Game Mill. Mostly because Game Mill is notorious for short windows of development with companies that go bankrupt after the game is of such poor quality that reputations are dunked on. When you look at reviews from real employees on Glassdoor or Reddit, it seems like employees are paid and treated halfway decently, unlike how people feel over at Game Mill. There's a lot to cover on a topic about licensed game developers and publishers, but to make it quick, it's It's just a mixed bag when it comes to quality, and unfortunately, Grinch Christmas Adventures is no different. But I'm going to talk about the positives first. The story is like all other Grinch games we talked about already. The main premise is about the Grinch stealing gifts and ruining the vibes of Whoville. The one thing this game has going for it over the others is the fact that you can go solo as the Scrunch, or play with Baby Boy Max. In 2-player mode, you jump in as Max and control him the whole time, jumping over spiders, grabbing onto ropes, hitting switches the Grinch can't reach, etc. In 1-player mode, you hit a bumper and control him briefly, but the camera struggles like heck to stay on Max in these required moments. I found that it canceled out my Max actions more often than not, so I had to repeat myself. There aren't a whole lot of moves you have at the beginning, just running and jumping. Right off the bat, I feel as though the regular jump blows, especially on moving platforms. He takes too long to hit the ground again, and he's slippery when he lands. This somehow feels better when you unlock double jumps. Each of the 3 hub worlds, the cave, countryside, and Whoville, have 6 levels inside of them. As you go through the levels, you find presents, and you find puzzle pieces. The more puzzle pieces you have, you unlock moves like swinging, snowboarding, and more on a separate screen. You have to do a goofy, easy little puzzle to get the move, which probably feels better in touchscreen mode. The moves are all okay, just like most things when it comes to control. I think most mechanics are just unrefined. It feels like sometimes they work and other times they don't. For example, with the candy rope, sometimes it allows you to slide down really low, and other times you fall right off. Grinch Adventures is a 2D platformer, if you couldn't tell already, but I thought it was novel how they had spots in the background you can access as you naturally progress through the level. There's a good bit of variety in the areas, and enemies change up fairly often, too. Some enemies are spiders you can dodge under or jump on. There's cookie monsters that try to catch you in a hug if you don't hide or evade them quick enough, on top of a handful of other things. Plus, as you traverse, there are ropes to swing on, platforms to mount, cliffs to jump, spikes to avoid, tunnels to fly through, yada yada. The areas weren't the bad part. It really is just the controls that bring it all down. If you're a young kid, however, you might kind of vibe with this. It's similar to Ratatouille's platformer in a way. Simple, easy, direct, and with a ton of tutorials. Oh, and this is a side note, but the loading time, on the Switch at least, was awful. Literally had up to 1 minute of loading between levels or even menus. I also thought it was oddly mixed when it came to sound, so I'd warn you to boost the voices and settings right away. Graphically, the game looks AA, and they do care enough to have idle animations for both Grunchy and Maxie. That's actually cool. The models look similar to what the 2018 Illumination movie was like, but not quite as fuzzy or saturated, probably to avoid copyrights. With that being said, the story is narrated like the old special was, and the Grinch only makes little grunts instead of talking, which I thought was different, in a good way. The loading screens, the menus, the level design, the art of the thing is genuinely the best a Grinch game has looked. It's especially cool that you can access old Seuss concept art that I literally haven't seen before, on top of a fully narrated and lightly animated book reading. It's all in the extras on the main menu, and it makes this Grinch game the Grinch game in my eyes. It feels authentic to the license, and I really appreciate that. If you're interested in checking this out or passing it on to a younger person, it's on the Switch, Xbox, and PlayStation consoles, going for $30 new and about $20 used. Fun fact, the printing from last year actually got really hard to track down and became rather expensive for a second. Keep that in mind if you like the Grinch, because if you pass it up now, this better version might dodge you later.
My favorite Christmas memory that has to do with a video game is a couple years back, me and my best friend Sheep decided that we were going to get really stupid good at fighting games because we both were like, this one genre of game we're not good at, but we want to get better at. So we spent the whole year playing them. And it was around Christmas time specifically where we got really heavily into playing the games for hours and hours a day together more often than not. And I also remember that for Christmas that year, Sheep had gotten me the Power Rangers beat 'em up fighting game that came out not that long ago, and both of us agreed it was the best fighting game we had ever played, from, that was made recently. And it's something that I think about quite often. And obviously, the skills and fun we had playing the fighting games around that time have stayed with us for however many years now. And it just always puts a smile on my face, especially whenever I see the little Power Rangers game or SNK Heroines, because we did also buy that around the same time. And sure, it hurts your eyes, but we had so much fun playing that too.
In 2010, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was released on the Wii and DS, published by Red Wagon Games, who really haven't made much of anything snazzy. High Voltage Software, who have helped on projects like Saints Row 4, Mortal Kombat 10 for Windows, and a ton of other cool things, developed the Wii version of the game, while Glyphic Entertainment worked on the DS port. The two versions of Rudolph are wildly different, with one being a 3-hour minigame and visual novel, and the other being a minigame romp. I'll be straight up with you. The Wii one is a joke. Wii and DS Rudolph was launched at the price point of $19.99. That's an incredible price for a 3-hour experience like you get on the DS, but on the Wii, get this, it's literally beatable in 15 minutes. If you were to buy either version right now, they're $10 or less, and even then, a 15-minute game, I just can't get behind it. The idea is that you'd play the 4 minigames again and again, but they suck so badly with crummy motion controls and lacking design that you'd get tired of it after 1, maybe 2 go-arounds. Okay, let's start from the top. The Wii game allows you to choose from 5 characters, and the models do look pretty good. Yet, keep in mind that only 2 players can join in at a time. The game has a very nice style of animation both in and out of cutscenes, feeling fluid and sharp when need be. Each cutscene has a bit of voice acting by the snowman narrator, but it's nothing top tier in the writing department. The color tones and general aesthetic are very true to the 1960s special, as is the music, although there aren't many tracks given that the missions last only a minute or 2. There is no story besides Rudolph helping Santa, which means all you do is smack gifts into sacks, cookie jars, make a few toys, then throw presents into chimneys as Rudolph guides the sleigh. There's just nothing to any of it. The minigames are so plain I could cry. I think the levels look alright, but that's literally all I get when I come away from this thing. 1 out of 10 would not recommend. DS Rudolph is by no means a saving grace, but it's interesting. The unlockable minigames are very simple and definitely intended for small kids, yet the story sections are super long, like almost 30-minute sections, and require a good amount of reading skills, which doesn't feel like something little kids can do. I guess that's subjective, because who says the audience is only littles? But I don't know who else would really be digging into this nowadays, except for my silly friends who play Bratz Flaunt Your Fashion unironically. It actually kind of sucks that kid games tend to receive pretty negative reviews, but the quality of a lot of kids games in the late 2000s to late 2010s just ain't it. In all honesty, I wasn't the type of kid to even ask for licensed stuff, which actually leads into one of my Christmas memories. I have written many Christmas lists, and apparently I didn't know how to spell Rudolph, but I think it's kind of funny as Rodolph, so I'm permanently going to call it that, actually. This Christmas, I did actually get my copy of Force Unleashed, but as a little kid, once it started getting halfway in, I could not play the game anymore because you had to learn so many combos instead of just basic attacks to, really swing your lightsaber around, and I just was not here for it. I think that same Christmas, I actually got a game from my grandma, which almost never happened. She bought me, from Sears, Red Dead Redemption Undead Nightmare, and I remember my oldest cousin being super jealous that I got that. That's another game where I played it and then I couldn't finish it because, as I've said a few times on this channel, I get motion sick pretty easily, but I didn't think that at the time I would get motion sick, but because I was 11 or so, but I did, so then I couldn't play the game anymore, which really stinks. I still haven't really played a lot of Red Dead games because of that. But when I was 12 and we had moved to the suburbs, I had always been a Sony kid. That was just what I got. I got a PS1, 2, 3, and then around 2012, I started watching YouTube more, and I saw this game called Catherine, and the person I was watching play it was playing it on the PS3, and the cover was super provocative, and I didn't think I could get away with it. So, when I got a little bit of money for Christmas, the day after Christmas, I went with my dad to Best Buy, and I was like a 12-year-old, and the people there were like, "What are you trying to buy?" And I was like, "Girl, I'm trying to buy an Xbox 360." Because the cover for Catherine was not as scary, okay? That was literally why I bought an Xbox 360. So silly. They were trying to sell me this 4 GB one that was like $20 less, and I was like, "Girl, that can't even fit the Skyrim game that you're trying to sell me this console with." Like, as if. So I bought my 120 GB. My dad the whole time was like, "Why are you buying this? This is so stupid." It's the same thing as a PS3, because at the time he didn't understand like game collecting so much, and like that there are differences between the systems. He was just like, "This is an HD system and we already have an HD system." And I was like, "Girl, let me play Catherine." Then I sprinted over to GameStop, which was literally one door over from Best Buy, and I bought my little $20 Catherine copy. And every single day I played that game, I would close my eyes and see bricks. Every single day. And at some point, I started hanging out with this kid who was on my bus because we went to the same school, and he was like a Halo boy. Like, he was like all about that life. And he would bring me little toast with butter on it, and it was sourdough bread. It was delicious. And then we would talk about Catherine and how I was dating C. Catherine and K. Catherine at the same time because I was classy. The first story level you access is the Rudolph Story, but be warned that once you start, there is no saving. The whole section is pretty long, and the game doesn't let you exit at any point. There are multiple different stories able to be unlocked, including one about Mrs. Claus and everyone's dentist, Hermie. As you play through stories, you unlock games in between, which are also playable at any time from the home screen. There are dozens of different games, including a makeshift scratch-off lotto ticket, click and paint, and more. These levels do not increase in difficulty, but instead change the characters involved. The interface graphics look clean and very colorful. The 2D models are rendered in a pretty realistic style that I quite like, but the music is certainly lacking. There are like 2 renditions of the Rudolph song without any vocals, and that's all you'll hear for the 3-hour runtime. Nauseating. Though I do think the sound effects do well enough to give this swipe of your stylus a good weight to it. If you're a big Rudolph fan, the stories are fun to play through when you have extra time, but if you aren't into visual novels, this is probably not worth it. Alright, so now we need to get into some better stuff because the last one was an unfortunate dud. This one is a game for all ages, even though the hardware is rough to come by. Christmas Nights is like the holiday game. Nights into Dreams is a Sega Saturn game from 1996 and developed by Sonic Team as they fought for their life on a Sonic game that never came out. That's another story, but Nights is a very beloved little game by all who have played it. The Christmas demo was released in the same year in different magazines. If you play during December, it's Christmas Nights. If you play on New Year's, it's New Year's Nights. Playing outside of November, December, January, and you have the original game demo. Christmas Nights is what I'm most into, and I actually like the upbeat Jingle Bells and Joy to the World tracks. Plus, on Christmas Day, you even see Santa flying around in the background. Valentine's Day means heart snow instead of regular snow. April's Fool's Day is even included. Instead of playing as the Joker-ish Knights character, you play as their rival named Rayalis. Even depending on the hour, different candy will flurry around you. There's just so much love put into this little demo, it's actually astounding. The story is told with a cutscene spoken in English if you go PAL or Euro. The Japanese part of the game has the cutscene in Japanese, but the text and menus are all English. Keep that under your hat when we go into pricing later. The narration lets us know that there's a big town festival, but the adults forget the best part of tree decorating, topping the tree with a little star. There's a boy and girl who actually become the titular knight's character after they go into a dreamland. And they're the ones who decide they have to get a star up on that tree. You must get 20 ornament-looking things to pass the stages, and there's only 2 stages, but I promise you, there's more content than you might think. In the levels, you go through rings doing acrobatic moves and boost after hitting party blowers. The regular Saturn controller is amazing, genuinely one of the best ever, but specifically for Nights into Dreams, an analog controller was made. Unfortunately, it's freaking expensive, and more often than not, they're broken secondhand. So, you do not have to play using one. I did not. There's a memory minigame that unlocks tons of stuff, and there are more little gifts to click on as you get a higher score in the levels. Unlockables include stuff like the theme song and karaoke, 3D concept stills, or time attack. My favorite addition is playing as Sonic, where you fight Eggman at the end of the level. He actually plays differently too, jumping at objects more than flying through hoops. Did you know this was the first 3D Sonic appearance ever in a video game? Based. This is what we could have had in Sonic Extreme. The Eggman battle theme is actually a song from Sonic CD too. Very, very cool. Honestly, the game in general gives that Sonic vibe. The scores you get will get higher and higher with practice and memorization. Certainly the cheapest option to physically own this little gem is the Japanese CD case version. There is something so clean about the cover art, by the way. Knights is a very androgynous being, but I think that adds to the timeless nature of them. Your other option is the PS2 Knights port that's got a better frame rate, tighter visuals, and it includes Christmas Nights. But a ton of bonus features are left out. There have even been HD ports, which also include Christmas Nights in it, so keep that in mind, because you can still get it on PC and PS3. Those are certainly more accessible, but I'm gonna be real. The game loses charm when it's not on the Saturn. This just proves that art design can elevate a game way past the hindrance of hardware restrictions. Lastly, the PAL and US releases are most common in their original sleeves, both around $40. I've actually talked about the Dreamcast a good amount of times so far on the channel, and there are no signs of stopping. Pure gold is on the system, and one of my favorite games to come from that era is Shenmue. Just so you know, I've more often played the PS4 version, but you'll be seeing Dreamcast footage. I'd recommend the PS4 version more so. I just feel like it operates more comfortably with a modern controller, and I don't find the upscaled graphics to bother me one bit. With all that aside, Shenmue is set in December of 1986, and with its small-town aesthetic, drunken Santa in Snowfall, oof, it is the coziest game on the list by far. The Sega aesthetic is just on another level entirely. Everything is so detailed for the time especially. It was also the most expensive game of 1999, and it flopped. Breaks my heart. But I want to talk about what it does well. The actual story has very little to do with Christmas, being about our main boy Ryo trying to track down his father's killer. The story won't literally blow your socks off, mostly because it was planned as a 4 or 5 part saga that's only gotten to part 3, and might take another 20 years to get a sequel. But it's charming nonetheless. It feels like a fictional Bruce Lee TV show. I really can't think of how else to put it. I love Bruce Lee though, so no shame, but it's a little tacky at times with the goofiest voice acting and outright hilarious lines. Shenmue tries to make a very memorable, real world by introducing the passage of time as a main mechanic. Only a few days a week do certain stores stay open, and only a few hours and minutes are people where you hope they are. If you miss them, you have to wait 15 to 20 minutes for the hours to pass in real life, if not longer. It's a controversial game because things can move quite slow. I feel like then to now, people have a hard time accepting the slower nature of gaming and allowing themselves to really be in even the mundane parts of a world. Many gamers have gotten very accustomed to rapid growth and reflex-based shooters, but the constantness of those games can get really exhausting. Shenmue allows for you to just breathe, take it all in, and the small-town vibe of Dobuta, Japan, is perfect for this. Although a lot of the game isn't snowing or decorated for Christmas and New Year's, it's decorated and laid out so specifically that you have to pass that little gashapon machine. You have to pass that park with the little cat. You've got to greet the hot dog stand guy, and so on. It forces you to get used to the routine of the locals and encourages you to engage with them as often as you can to gain information. There is fighting, and it's literally using the earlier Virtual Fighter system of combos and movements, which I love. And, well, by the way, did you guys see the Virtual Fighter 5 limited run release? I'm literally so tempted on getting it, but, where was I? The fighting is not the main point at all. In fact, it rarely comes into play. Again, the little encounters with your love interest at the shop she works at, the cat you save at the park, the women you help out on the street, enjoying the arcade, Practicing kung fu at your house, that's what the game is about. The Magic Weather System is a major player for the atmosphere, specifically with its randomness day by day, kind of like real life. Your day could permanently be ended by a bad storm, and you've got to walk back to the house in a big ol' hurry. But it's when it snows, whether it just started flurrying, or when the sky is blank but the ground is covered in leftover blankets of snow, that you feel something special all up in your heart. Every house gets decorated with little wreaths or bells. The people seem merrier than usual. The town area has banners exclaiming that it's indeed Christmas. But the best part of all? Santa is real! There he is! Look at him! Brother walks around all day long, spreading cheer, kind of. Shenmue's world is such a joy to be in. It's so intimate and personal in ways only small little towns could be. I was a city kid growing up, so being in small towns to this day can genuinely cause me to feel uneasy. When there's just nothing, no one, not even an animal to look at, things feel too quiet. I'm very comfortable being on my own, but that's in a room, an apartment, a house. But I know there are rows of apartments and hundreds of people all around me when I'm at home. Shenmue is small, but it feels warm, full with people even if there are only a dozen or so stores in the whole little town. It reminds me of being a teenager, where there's so much out there, but so little I could have accessed on my own. Talking about its small town appeal reminds me of Persona 4's most charming aspect. And on the flip side, the major playground that makes up Yakuza's urban city with so much crammed into it that it's almost too much is also a vibe. The aesthetic of winter in those games specifically are immaculate and something I'll certainly touch on one day. If you'd like to try Shenmue out because you haven't already, it's under $20 on PS4 and Xbox One, but over $35 on the Dreamcast. With all of that said and done, thank you for watching. I wish you the merriest of Christmases, happy holidays, and a fantastic start to your new year.